Wanting to do your big lap, but freaking out about how you'll find work along the way? Well, in this episode of Big Lap Business, we're talking to Miranda from Endless Days of Oz, who has got finding work on the road down pat. Here's what she has to say. Hey Big Lappers, and welcome to another episode of Big Lap Business. I'm here today with Miranda. Hey Miranda, how are you?
Hi, good, thanks. How are you?
Great, thank you for joining me. Now, today we're going to be talking about finding work on the road because you've been on the road a little while now and you've got a little bit of experience in that. But before we get there, give us a bit of information about who you are, what your travel style is, who you're traveling with, and perhaps more importantly, what is your Instagram handle? Because everybody obviously wants to know that.
That's it. So there's myself, my partner, and our 3.5-year-old daughter. We also have 2 dogs who we travel with, and we travel under the name Endless Days of Oz. So we've been on the road just over 18 months now. We've got a caravan, we've got the car set up, and we basically just travel full time. We pick up work where we can, but we're sort of taking it really slow. We don't really plan too much. We just go sort of wherever it feels like is the right place for us next. So yeah.
Cool. So before you left on your big lap, what's your background? What were your jobs?
So I worked in admin and bookkeeping, and my partner is a heavy diesel mechanic. So he's very handy having the trade, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I imagine that there would be quite a lot of work for him. Before you left on your big lap, how much did you save? And did you think, you know what, let's just get on the road and we'll find work where we find it? Or did you have a sort of a little pot built up so you didn't have to find work straight away?
We were really keen to try not to have to work as little as possible throughout our time traveling, because that's what we really wanted to focus on. So before we left, we pretty much sold. We were only renting, so we didn't have a house or anything to sell, but we had a boat at that time. So we sold our boat. We sold, most of our household goods and stuff because, this is like our 5-year plan. So that sort of stuff to us isn't really important at the moment. So yeah, we just worked as much as we could. We were both working full time, and we were really thankful where we worked and the jobs that we were in, that they were well paid, so that helped us a lot. And in terms of like how much we didn't really know how much we would actually need, especially once you take out like the rental expenses and stuff like that.
It's that $1 million question, excuse the pun, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it, right. And like we looked at so many different like web pages and blogs and stuff from other travelers, and it was so varied. Like, some would say, their budget was $500 a week, whereas others were saying, it's $1,000. So we roughly just worked out a number in our head that we thought would be enough to get us by at least for a year without having to do any work. And then we just saved. So we had that amount. So we had worked out around 55,000 would probably be enough. We just thought $1,000 a week for the whole year plus a little bit extra. And I can't remember exactly how much we saved, but we had always said to ourselves that we would leave like a buffer in our savings. So if we got down to say half or 2/3 of what we had saved, then we knew that was definitely the time to start looking for work. But we never really had a set plan of, okay, we'll get 6 months in and then we'll look for work. We pretty much, if work came up and we were available to do it in the town, then we would stop and, spend some time there. And every time we did stop for work, it'd always top up those savings. So yeah, it was always handy to have.
Yeah. So how long had you been traveling before you got your first job?
So I think it was about 3 months. So we were from Northern WA, and we originally went over to Queensland, and we went up, did the northern part of Queensland, and we actually came back down to my hometown where I grew up in. And we were just, at that time, it was around October, so we sort of decided to stay around until Christmas time. And yeah, my partner was like, oh, why don't we try and see if there's any work available? And in my hometown, there's an abattoir that's there, and he literally went in, said, "Oh, do you have any jobs available?" And by the time we got home to my parents' place, probably about 2 hours later, he had a call up saying, "We've got a job for you. Do you want to come in?" And he's like, "Oh, okay, yep." Not expecting anything to sort of come of it. So
Yeah, that seems like a bit
yeah.
of a change of pace for him.
Yeah, definitely. So at first, they offered him just driving a forklift, and then, but he ended up by the end of the weekend, that because it was on a Friday, by the end of the weekend, they had moved into a different department and doing something. It was more engineering based, so like checking over all the computerized machinery and stuff. So completely out of what he's used to. And yeah, he was there for I think just over 2.5 months. So
Wow.
yeah.
So do you think that's a key then? Just being super flexible to what, to the opportunities that come about and
Oh,
taking
definitely.
anything?
Yeah, I think if you're willing to do anything and just put yourself out there and apply for things, even if it's not in your background or your skill set, you can always learn new
Mm.
skills. And most places are, like I said, most places provide training, or, there's always something that you can learn from it. So, yeah, I think if you're flexible, there's definitely jobs out there.
Yeah, definitely. How do employers go with hiring people who are on the road full time? And do you disclose that? Are you honest with them about only being in the place a couple of months?
We are usually, yes. Most of the time, we do tend to just apply for short-term roles.
Mhm.
There have been a couple of jobs which I've applied for, which were they were looking for someone more permanent. But I think for the one job that I interviewed for, and they ended up calling me back and saying, "Yep, we're really interested if you'd like to start." But I mentioned to them, I said, "Look, we're only going to be there probably 3-4 months," and they said that probably wouldn't suit what they were after. So I think it's always best to be honest at the start, because at the end of the day, if you want to use them as a reference, if you've said, yeah, I'll commit to a permanent job, and then you end up leaving after 2 months or whatever, it's not really
Yeah.
a good look. So yeah, that's something we're always mindful of.
So other than the abattoir job, have there been any weird jobs that you never thought you'd be doing?
Not really. So Damien's done most of the work for the time that we've been on the road, and I think so. He's done three work stops plus like a couple of cash jobs. So it's not anything too weird. I think the abattoir was probably the weirdest one, just because we never knew how an abattoir actually ran. Like I think we're a bit naive on how that process was.
Mhm.
So that was definitely a bit of an eye opener for him, but yeah, it's not anything too weird or wacky. We have found some weird jobs like posted online and stuff, but not anything too extreme for us as yet.
So let's talk about like the process of getting the job. Where do you look for these jobs?
So we do a lot online. So a lot of Facebook. There's obviously a ton of Facebook pages. I think there's even one targeted for just traveling families.
Mhm.
But we also follow some pages for like rural and remote jobs for station work and things like that. And then the usual, we use like Seek to have a look on within the area and see what jobs are sort of available. But even word of mouth. So even just within caravan parks. So at the park where we're staying now, Damien's got some working on one of the other persons here. He's got a bus and it needs some work done to it. So he's had a chat to him and he's just like, "Oh yeah, I need some work on my bus." So yeah. And sometimes just word of mouth even just works out, or people mention about jobs and things like that. So
Yeah, absolutely. I might get you to send me those links to the pages you were
yeah,
talking about,
yeah,
especially for
definitely.
the remote traveling families kind of job boards, and we'll
Yep.
put them in our show notes. So if anybody listening to this wants to check them out, they can go and have a look at the show notes, and then they can go over to those boards as
Yeah,
well.
definitely. And one other thing we found, like even just when you're in the bigger cities, like employment agencies as well
Mm.
are really good. Some of the major ones that are nationwide, you can just put your resume in with them online, and then when you go to an area, if they have jobs available, they might actually call you. You might
Mhm.
not actually be looking for it. So, yeah, there's
That's
definitely
such
lots of options.
Yeah, that's such a good call. I really like that because, sometimes signing up with an agency can be a bit of a palaver. But if you can
Yeah,
find the national kind of agencies and just say, hey, I'm in this area, then it could work wonders.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So has there ever been a point where you've been stressed about having to find work? Obviously, you did set off with quite a big savings pot, but has there ever been a point where you thought, oh no, we have to find work, otherwise we're screwed?
Yeah, definitely. I think it comes from not having that stability of having a job full time. So for us, we were in Queensland when COVID hit. So when lockdown happened, we were thankful that we were staying at my parents' farm, but we were sort of sitting there. We still had you still have your expenses. So you still have your food expenses, you have your insurances, your bills, etc. So that was sort of money that we were sitting still. We weren't able to travel and we couldn't work at that time as well. So for 3 months, that was pretty much. And while we're trying to look for work, it's very hard because obviously there wasn't as many jobs listed. And we were really lucky that we actually had a friend who we knew from our hometown, and he was based in Queensland and he had his own business. So he's said to Damien, he's like, oh, if I've got some work, are you interested? And so we travelled out there. So this was in central Queensland, and we ended up spending 2.5 months there. So it worked out really well. But
do you sometimes feel like you commit to a job and then you're like, oh, I wish we could just go travel, continue doing it?
Yeah, definitely. I think when we do a work stop, so I think sort of our first job, I think that was one of the things. We were sort of sitting there and it was good to be around family, but we really wanted, we'd already spent 3 and a bit months traveling full time, and that urge to just keep going and see new stuff is it pushes you to keep going. You need to work to save up money so you can keep doing that. But yeah, it was very hard at times.
Is there a sweet spot of, okay, you can last six weeks before you decide that, okay, we got to go, or is it just as and when on a case by case?
So case by case. So we did. So we're up in Darwin at the moment, but we've just done a work stop in Katherine, and we actually spent 8 weeks there. Mm-hmm. And Damien was driving the forklift. He was doing 12-hour days, and he barely had a day off the whole time we were there. Mm-hmm. So that sort of, for me, I was really restless because obviously looking after Summer all day, it was a bit boring. There wasn't too much to do in the town, and keep a 3-year-old occupied. But yeah, you definitely, I think if you're sort of really looking forward to your next stop as well, that makes it a bit harder. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you just do what you have to, I suppose, and make the most of it.
So how long ago did you leave Katherine?
About 6 weeks now. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So does it have a flip side to it? Obviously, you've been back on the road 6 weeks now. Are you chomping to get back to work, or no?
Sort of. So our plan was originally to go down the East Coast because we were based in Queensland around September last year. But then just everything with COVID, we just decided to skip the East Coast with all the restrictions and stuff and turn back around and come back into the NT. And we sort of made a plan that we would use the wet season as a time to get work. So that's, now until about April. And because we know already, we're from Northern WA, so we know what the weather's like, and we know what the job situations are. There's so many jobs available, and it's quite quiet because not a lot of people are here. So yeah, we sort of just planned that the next few months we'll take as much work as we can get, and then we'll make a plan from there.
Mm-hmm. On a logistical side of things, living in a caravan is obviously very different to living in a house. And, when you've been working all day, especially in a physical job, coming home and not having your own, couch and bathroom and bath, I would be craving a bath. Yeah. Is it difficult to do that?
It is, yeah. And even especially if you're doing shift work as well. So one of our first work stops was doing shift work. So that was starting either very early in the morning. And when you're in a caravan, there's not a lot of space to sort of buffer out any noises. So, always having to be super quiet, not to wake, our daughter up, and even just leaving at all hours of the night and stuff as well. So, yeah, and just to have your own space as well. When we were in Katherine, there wasn't much because we actually stayed on the premises where my partner was working. So there wasn't much room for myself and Summer to go and for Summer to run around and stuff like that. So it was a bit confining, but we made do.
Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, there's some negative sides to having to do work stops. And by the way, that is a new word in my vocabulary. I love how it just like rolls off your tongue. It's like a work stop. It's just a thing of a part of the big laugh.
It becomes a part of your day to day.
Yeah, exactly. So aside from, the negative parts of actually having to do the work, is it worth doing that work and potentially being bored, like you would say? You're saying you were in Catherine and not much to do while hubby was at work. Is it worth that to be able to travel longer?
I think so, definitely. And like I was saying, for us, we don't have a set time frame. So we're sort of thinking the next couple of years, this will be what we're doing. But to be able to make it, and it also makes it a bit less stressful as well, because we know if we get somewhere that we might want to do, so like an experience or something that if we weren't working, probably we wouldn't factor into because we think, oh, it's too expensive or not something we could do. And we sort of have that reassurance behind us that, yep, okay, we can do that and do it to the fullest that we'd want to do. So yeah, I think for us, it's definitely worthwhile. We do often wonder whether it's something like whether we're unintentionally like setting our future selves back by doing it this way, but the good definitely outweighs the bad.
Yeah. Now, obviously you saved quite a bit of money before you went. Do you think, now knowing what you know now about finding jobs on the road, do you think people could go with a lot smaller sort of savings pot?
I think it depends on what sort of their travel style is. Like, obviously, everyone's completely different. We see so many different setups from, people are traveling full-time in tents or motorhomes or buses, and everyone's obviously at different stages in their lives. I think, and it depends depending if you have any like other expenses and things like that definitely makes a big difference. So obviously we didn't have a mortgage or anything to worry about. We owned our car, we own our caravan, so those things we didn't have to worry about. But I think if you're willing to live sort of, not live basic, like not saying, you have to live on, on bare minimum, but, if you're willing to chop out things that maybe you would normally have, like, eating out or stuff like that, it's definitely doable to do it for a lot less. But some weeks we would spend, we might spend that $1,000, but then other weeks we might only spend $500. So it's just really dependent on where you are and what you're doing.
Yeah. Does the place you're going influence whether you want to stop there? I know, and this is a strange question because you just told me that you stopped in Catherine for 8 weeks, and that's not. I mean, it's a beautiful part of the country, but it's not necessarily a place that a lot of people want to stop for that duration of time.
Yeah, and we didn't actually plan to stop in Catherine. Our plan was we were making our way up to Darwin, and we literally seen this job advertised on their Facebook jobs, I think it is, and my partner's just like, oh, why don't we just apply and see what happens? And same sort of deal. I put his resume in, they called him up and said, we've got a job for you, but it's not the one that was advertised. And he's like, oh, okay. So literally came in, and then they for us, they had offered, so obviously it was, decent money, good hours, and accommodation was provided. So we didn't have any expenses. So we just thought, oh, stuff it, we'll just stay here and see how it goes. And it all worked really well. And it was a good job for not only saving money, but we met some amazing people as well. So that makes it all better.
Yeah, definitely. Now, when it comes to sort of getting on the road in the first instance, was it scary to leave your corporate job?
Yes. I think because when we had left, Summer she was just under 18 months old. And so I'd not long returned to work from maternity leave, and she had a few health complications. So we were going backwards and forwards to the hospital a lot. So I was having quite a bit of time off work, but for my partner, definitely, it was a bit of a shock because like we've both worked full time since we left high school, so that's always been something that we've always had to fall back on. And I think having the uncertainty of not having that that regular paycheck, that was quite nerve-wracking.
But it's funny because you talk about the uncertainty of not having that regular paycheck, but I feel like from listening to you talk, it feels like you have integrated this process of job hunting and looking for jobs and not necessarily desperately needing a job, but it's like this process has been integrated into you, because obviously, you know, if you went to Catherine, you must have joined the Catherine Facebook page and found that job and then applied for it and all those kinds of things. So is it just a part of your day-to-day now?
It is, yeah. I think it's just the whole, even just traveling full time if you're not working, I think it's just a whole different you just have a whole different mindset, and the way you approach things is completely different to how you would say if you were working, you know, in your standard 9 to 5 life. Like, I think we're a lot more, like, don't get me wrong, we still stress about, you know, where money's coming from and where we're going next and where we can travel and where we can't go. But I definitely find we're a lot more relaxed about things, and we just sort of let the air, like, we do pre-plan a little bit, like where we're going, and we do plan around, we might go to areas where we know are prone to get jobs. So like for us coming to Darwin, that was a bit of a strategic move because we knew that we would be able to get work here. So
Cool. All right, well, thank you, Miranda. We're going to wrap it up there. But before we go, I want to ask you one more question. What is the biggest piece of advice you've got anybody looking for jobs on their big lap?
I would say just be flexible. Like, that's the main thing for us. Like, if you're willing to give anything a try, there's definitely jobs out there. You know, it might mean you have to go and spend more time in a town that you've probably never heard of, or it might be in the back blocks of nowhere, but you know, there are jobs there. And if you're willing to put your hand up and say, yep, I can do that, or I'll give it a try, then I think you'll be right in finding work.
So does that put your mind at ease about how easy it is to find work on the road? Well, I certainly hope so. And if you're loving these videos, please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. It really does help us grow and bring you these videos every single week. Bye for now.